Welcome back everyone. Last time we were able to set up Django, it's up and running on our machine. So now I want us to go ahead and start registering the user so we'll be able to work on this endpoint here. So right here in our project, I want to start by getting Django REST Framework installed. So run ppnv install Django REST Framework. So once that is installed, then you need to add it to our installed apps. So go to the installed apps section in the settings.py file, which is right here, and then add REST_framework. Alright, so now once we have this, we are going to set up an app to handle our registration and login and our password reset stuff. So I'm going to set up another app. So here, I'm going to run Python. Then I'll run Python 3 manage.py start app. So we're going to start an app called authentication. So this creates an app here. So right here, I'm going to start by adding some files because we're going to need them. One is going to be the serializers file, serializers.py. So in here we'll do our serialization basically. So another one is going to be urls.py. Okay, so this is going to be mostly it. So in our views.py, we are going to set up our class-based view to handle our registration. So class register view. So this is going to inherit from generic API view. So let me actually first bring it in here. So from REST framework .generics import generic API view. Okay, so right here we are going to inherit from generic API view. And basically when you inherit from this, it basically gives you ability to handle like all the request types the way you want. So what we want to do is handle a post request. So do a def post. So this of course now takes in self since it's a class, and then a request. So right now I'm just going to leave it here, and then we are going to go to our serializers.py and then create a serializer. I'm going to set up a serializer class to work with our models and views. So I'm going to call it user serializer. So class user serializer. So this is going to inherit from serializers model serializer. Okay, so right here, let me actually import serializers. So from REST framework, import serializers. Okay, so right here, since we are going to be working with the user, and we are working basically with the built-in user model, and the way that is constructed is some of the things are not entirely custom. So when it comes to things like password validations, to like making the email fields basically unique, we need to do like some additional stuff. So right here, I'm going to define the fields that are going to be exposed to the view. So as you know, like the built-in user model has a lot of fields and we might not need to work with those. So right here, first thing you're going to need to work with the password. So set password. This is going to be equal to serializers char field. And then here, I want it to have a max length of 65. Then I want it to have a min length, of course, so min underscore length. So I want it to have at least 6 characters or 8. So also I want it to be only write only. So write only equals true. So basically this allows us to like not retrieve it. So when a user makes like registers, we don't want to send it back in the response we send. So this basically will do that. And then we're going to now set up our other field. So the other one is going to be the email. So email is going to be serializers.email field. And then here we can give it max length equals 255, min length min underscore length equals, let's say 5, let's say 4, and then we're going to also set up the first name and last name. So first underscore name equals serializers dot char field, and then I'm going to copy this just so we can save some time. Okay, so the minimum can be 2, and then I'm going to duplicate it for the last name. Alright, so now that we have that, we basically need to define a class meta. So in the class meta, let me actually first bring it up so we can talk over it. So in the class meta, we can add some additional information for the serializer to know what to do with specific things. So one of the things it's going to need to do is like work with the model, create stuff in the database, and then return things to the view. So we need to set up a model here. And since we are inheriting from the model serializer, we have to give it a model. So this is going to be the user. And of course, we need to import the user. So from django.contrib.auth.models import user. Okay, so another thing, we're going to need to define the fields list. So the fields list basically describes the things that we allow the user to see in the responses. So here I'm going to add fields. So I'm going to set it to a list, and now I can like add the things I would want to be seen. So the first one is going to be the username. The second thing is going to be the first name, then the last name, and the email. Alright, so once we have that, then, so once we have that, like I mentioned before, you notice that on like the email, here in the serializer, we can't like really come and pass in like unique true. No, we can't do that. So if you want to validate, like handle some custom validations for this serializer, for example, if we want to make sure that the email is unique, we need to override a method called validate. So right here, define validate. So what this does is basically this is the method that gets called before an instance is created. So when a user is like creating an account, before we save it, basically this gets called first. So right here, now we can check the database to see if the user exists and then return an error if an email is taken. So right here, we can do if, since we have already imported the user model, so if user objects.filter, and then we want to filter by the email. So right here, now the email is going to be equal to, okay, this second argument in the function, in the method, is the one that gives us the data that is being sent. So right here, now we can check for the email like this. So once we have this, you don't have to worry if the email is provided, because it's going to get called here, as this is going to validate the min length first before this one goes. Okay, so right here, now we can call .exists. And basically what this does is it's going to check if this email already exists, like some other instances have it, and then if it exists, then we want to return an error. What we need to do is write raise, and then we're going to need to raise serializers, validation error, and then what we do is we give it a key and value. So here, supply a dictionary, and then the first one is going to be like the key, and then the second one is going to be the exact message. Okay, so right here now we can give it the human readable message, something like email is already in use. Okay, so if you don't do this, like if you only raise validation error and you don't provide the key, it's going to go ahead and use a field called non-field errors. So a lot of times you won't need that, so you can prefix with your own key. So once we have this, now we need to override another method called create. So def create. So now this create is actually the one that creates the instance. So since now we are creating an instance, we basically want to create the user in like the Django way. So the way it's done is you do user.objects create user. So normally you would say user.objects.create, but since we are creating a user, we have to use the create user function itself. So right here, Now create user of course takes in the data, so we can pass in this data. So instead of doing objects.create, create user will know that, oh, this is a user, and it will handle it the way it should for other users. All right, so once we are done here, now we need to go back to our view and set up some more stuff. So here in the view, the first thing we need to define is the serializer class. So let's first import our serializer class. So from .serializers, import user serializer. So let's define our serializer class. So you define serializer underscore class, and then you set it to our user serializer. Right here, we need to say serializer equals user serializer, and then right here we are instantiating the user serializer, so we need to give it the data for it to work with, for example, to validate and all that stuff. So you give it data equals, so we are going to give it the data that the user submits, which is always in request.data. Now after that, we need to call isValid. So if serializer.isValid, so what this is going to do is going to run the validate function which we created here, the validate method. Sorry, this can be used interchangeably. So this is going to run that, and now after that, then we can run serializer.save. So save will run the create, and then isValid will run the validate. So now this will run this when we call isValid, then it's going to come in here and run this validate. So if there is an error, it's going to stop it, and then once it's valid, then it's going to run save, which means it's going to come in here and then it's going to create the user basically. All right, so once we have this, now here we can return a response. So return, I'm going to import response. So from REST framework dot response, import response. I'm also going to import status. So from REST framework, import status. Okay, so right here we are going to return a response. So response takes in the data and then the status. So the data now is going to be serializer.data. So what this is going to do now, it's going to come and look here. So it's going to come and look at what we have here. So that will be the same thing what we have in the fields, and then it's going to return this. So when it creates, then the data will contain everything we define here, and it will not contain the things we define as write only. All right, hope that was clear. So now, if everything okay, then we return user serializer.data, and then if there is a problem, of course, we need to send back errors. So outside the if, now you can return response. So here we need to send out the errors which you can get from serializer.errors, and then let's send a status. So status here we can send something like status dot bad request, because it's registration. Normally for the most part the user will be sending some weird data. So send like bad request when there is an error on registration. So right here we also need to send a status. So status equals status. Now this is going to be like created, because we are going to be creating a new instance, a new resource. All right, so once we have this, now we can go ahead and test it. All right, so we have an applied migration. So let's first migrate them. So Python 3 manage.py migrate. Okay, so that migrates. So now we can run back our server. And by the way, when you create an app, you're always going to need to register it. So before we even continue, I'm going to come to my settings.py file. Then I'm going to register our authentication app. All right, so now the server has restarted. I'm going to pick our base URL. So right now we have defined all this, but we haven't set up our URL patterns, so that the application can know how to write to route to these views of ours. So here, Django.urls import path. Also, I'm going to import our views. So from .views, import the register view. Okay, so here we define a URL patterns. So URL patterns. So now we define paths. So path, the first one is going to be register, and this one is going to now go to views. So it's going to go to register view, but then we need to call as view. Okay, so this sets it up in our app routing. So we also need to set it up with the main application routing. So in the urls.py right here, now we need to add another one. So we can add like path. Let's say we want to go to API slash maybe auth. So we want all the requests going to slash API slash auth to be handled by our authentication application. So here I'm going to import a utility called include. And what include does basically is it will combine all the URLs defined in the URL pattern and then add them at once. So here run include. So you put the name of the app. So it's going to be authentication .urls. Alright, so once we have this, now we can go ahead and test it out. Okay, so let's go to, I'm going to open up Postman. So right here, let me create a collection because I want to organize everything in one collection. So I'm going to call it contacts API. So here, contacts API, where is it? So now let's add the register request. So basically this is going to go to slash API slash auth slash register. Okay, so it's going to be a post request. So right now if you send a post request, oh, page not found. So let's look at how we are setting up our URL. So it's slash API slash auth. So put a slash here and then come back and try it again. So first thing, you're going to realize that we get some errors. For example, we didn't add password to our fields array. So let's come back here in the serializer.py and then add it. Okay, so let's try it again. Let me actually close out this because we ain't using it anymore. We'll get back to it later. So let's try again. So now you can see that we get our validation error. So the first one says like username is required, first name is required, and all this stuff. So right here, you can come to the body, click row, and then let's choose JSON. So now let's define like all this stuff. So let me supply username, then the username is going to be, let's say, Christ Truly. Then first name is going to be Christ. The last name is going to be Truly. Then the password is going to be something like password 345. So now if we send a request again, so you can see that there is an error. So the email is not being, so we didn't provide an email, so let's provide it. But now you see this kind of breaks our application. So for us to be able to solve something like this, you need to come here in the validate. So before we do this, we need to do something like, so let's create email. So email is going to be this, but then I want to use get here such that I can be able to pass in an optional, like a default param once this is not provided. So right here, now I can pass email. Okay, so this should basically catch that error. Okay, so here let's provide the email just so we can keep going. So this is going to be email at test.com. Click send. And now you can see that Oh, interesting. So you can see that the way it's formatted is not correct. So what you can do now is when you come to our application, you notice that when we get validated data, we just pass it in as is. So what this does is going to pick the first attribute here in the list, and then it's going to create like all the validated data for that. So what we need to do is add these 2 stars on there, and that is going to be able to spread all this. Okay, so here now if we try again, you see we get account created 201, and then you see we get a new object. Okay, so if we try again, you can see that the username exists. So if I change to another one, send, you can see that the email exists. And now basically we have an issue here. So instead of setting it as a comma, we basically need to set it as a key value. So put that full colon and then try again. You can see that now we get a correct thing. Okay, so this is now going to do it for our registration. In the next one, we are going to go ahead and set up the login and JWT. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.